I watched from my kitchen window that Tuesday morning as 3 bulldozers rolled onto my property in Fairfax County, Virginia, and my first thought was that someone had made a terrible mistake. My second thought, as I sprinted out the back door in my pajama pants and bare feet, was that my 100-year-old barn was about to become rubble, and nobody had asked my permission. "Stop! What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, waving my arms as I ran across the dewy grass. The lead bulldozer was already positioning itself near the weathered red structure that had stood on my family's land since 1924. My grandfather built that barn with his own hands, timber by timber, and I'd spent the last 3 years meticulously restoring it. A woman in a crisp beige pantsuit emerged from a black SUV parked near my fence line. She held a clipboard and wore sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her blonde hair was cut in that severe bob that screamed, "I want to speak to the manager," from a mile away. "Mr. Nash Everett?" she called out, her voice sharp and businesslike. "That's me, and you need to tell those operators to shut down right now." I was breathing hard, my heart hammering against my ribs. "This is my property." "Actually, Mr. Everett, according to the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association, Bylaws Section 12, Subsection 4, all structures over 50 years old require special permits and must meet current safety standards. Your barn failed inspection and was deemed a hazard. We sent you 3 notices." 3 notices? I never received a single letter about any inspection, and nobody has the right to demolish anything on my land without my explicit consent. I pulled out my phone, already dialing. "I'm calling the police." She removed her sunglasses, revealing pale blue eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. "I'm Patricia Whitmore, president of the Meadowbrook Hills HOA. The police won't help you, Mr. Everett. This is a civil matter, and we have all the proper documentation. The demolition is scheduled for today, and frankly, you should have been more responsive to our communications." "What communications? Show me these supposed notices." Patricia made a show of flipping through papers on her clipboard. "We sent certified letters on March 15th, April 2nd, and April 28th. All were delivered according to the Postal Service." "That's impossible. I check my mail every single day." But even as I said it, a cold realization crept over me. My mailbox had been acting weird lately. I'd mentioned it to my neighbor, Tom, just last week. Letters arriving opened, some mail never showing up at all. I'd assumed it was a new carrier being careless. Regardless, the deadline has passed. The HOA board voted unanimously to proceed with demolition and development. Development? The word hit me like cold water. What development? Patricia's thin lips curved into something that might have been a smile on a more pleasant person. "The barn sits on what will become the eastern edge of our new townhouse complex. Meadowbrook Hills is expanding, and your property line happens to include a 1/4 acre that falls within the designated development zone, according to the original deed restrictions from 1987. My family has owned this land since 1920. There were no deed restrictions in 1987 because we weren't part of any HOA. That changed when the previous owner of this specific parcel, a Mr. Robert Chen, sold the property in 1989. He'd subdivided his holdings, and this lot was included in the newly formed HOA. When you purchased the property in 2019, you signed the HOA agreement. Perhaps you should have read it more carefully." My head was spinning. I'd bought this place from Robert's estate after he passed away. The closing had been rushed because I was relocating from Richmond for work, and yes, there had been mountains of paperwork. My real estate agent had assured me everything was standard. Even if that's true, you can't just demolish a building without giving the owner proper notice and an opportunity to contest it. "We gave you 3 months, Mr. Everett. The deadline was yesterday at 5 p.m. One of the bulldozer operators was climbing back into his machine. The engine roared to life, belching black smoke. "Stop! You stop right now, or I swear to God. Threatening an HOA official is grounds for additional fines, Mr. Everett. I suggest you calm down and accept the situation. The townhouses will increase your property value anyway. You should be thanking us." That's when I saw the truck pulling up the long driveway. My brother's truck, the white Ford F-150 with the county government plates. Benjamin had the Tuesday shift this week, and he usually stopped by for coffee before heading to the courthouse in Fairfax. He was the district attorney for Fairfax County, and right now, he was my favorite person in the entire world. Benjamin parked and got out, his eyes immediately taking in the scene with the sharp observation skills that made him dangerous in a courtroom. He was 3 years older than me, taller by 2 inches, and had that commanding presence that made people straighten up when he entered a room. "Nathan, what's going on?" He used my full name, which meant he was already in professional mode. "These people are trying to demolish my barn. They claim they sent notices that I never received, and they're saying the HOA has the right to do this." Benjamin walked over, and I saw Patricia's confident expression flicker slightly. She might not have recognized him out of context, but something about his bearing made her uncertain. "I'm Benjamin Everett, District Attorney for Fairfax County." "And you are?" "Patricia Whitmore, HOA President." She recovered quickly, thrusting out her hand. Benjamin didn't shake it. His eyes had moved to the bulldozers, then to the barn, then to some papers scattered on the hood of Patricia's SUV. "Do you have permits for this demolition?" "The HOA has full authority over—" "That's not what I asked. Do you have county permits for demolition of a structure this size?" Patricia's jaw tightened. "The HOA bylaws supersede—" "They don't supersede county building codes and permit requirements. That structure is over 1,000 square feet. Virginia law requires permits for any demolition over 200 square feet, regardless of private agreements between property owners." Benjamin pulled out his own phone. "I'm calling the building inspector's office right now." "This is harassment," Patricia snapped. "The HOA has every right to maintain community standards. The HOA has the right to enforce reasonable restrictions that don't violate state or federal law. Demolishing a structure without proper permits is illegal, period. If those bulldozers take down so much as a single board before the county inspector verifies your paperwork, I'll have everyone involved arrested for destruction of property and possibly criminal trespass." I watched Patricia's face cycle through several shades of red. "You can't intimidate me with your position, Mr. Everett. I know my rights." "Then you should also know that proceeding with unpermitted demolition is a Class 1 misdemeanor in Virginia, punishable by up to 12 months in jail and a $2,500 fine. And that's just for starters. If my brother can prove you deliberately interfered with his mail to prevent him from receiving proper notice, we're looking at federal charges. Mail tampering is a felony." The color drained from Patricia's face. "I never touched his mail." "Then who did?" "Because certified letters leave a paper trail, and if they were signed for by anyone other than my brother, we're going to find out who." Patricia grabbed her phone and stepped away, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. The bulldozer operator had shut off his engine again and was watching the confrontation with undisguised interest. Benjamin turned to me, lowering his voice. "Tell me everything, and don't leave anything out." I explained about the weird mail situation, about never receiving any notices from the HOA, about the inspection I'd supposedly failed. Benjamin listened with that intense focus that had won him a conviction rate of 93%. "When did you first notice problems with your mail?" "Maybe 6 weeks ago, early April." "And you mentioned it to anyone?" "Tom next door. He said his mail had been fine, so I figured it was just random." "We'll need to file a complaint with the postal inspector. If someone's been intercepting your mail, that's serious." Benjamin glanced at Patricia, who was still on her phone, her body language becoming increasingly agitated. "How much do you know about this HOA?" "Not much. I pay the dues quarterly, and they're supposed to maintain the common areas and the entrance landscaping. I've been to maybe 2 meetings in 5 years. Ever have problems with them before?" "No, but I mostly keep to myself. The barn project has kept me pretty busy." Patricia returned. Her expression schooled into careful neutrality. "I've spoken with our legal counsel. We're willing to postpone the demolition for 72 hours while we verify the permit situation." "You'll postpone it until the county inspector reviews the case and makes a determination," Benjamin corrected. "And you'll provide my brother with copies of all documentation related to this matter, including the alleged inspection report, the notices you claim to have sent, and the HOA board minutes where this demolition was approved. That's confidential HOA business. It's directly relevant to actions affecting my brother's property. You can provide it voluntarily, or I can have it subpoenaed. Your choice." Patricia's lips compressed into a thin line. "Fine. I'll have our secretary email everything by end of business today. I want hard copies, hand-delivered, by 5 p.m. today, and I want the name and contact information for whoever conducted the supposed safety inspection of that barn. This is outrageous. What's outrageous is attempting to demolish someone's property based on phantom notices and questionable authority. If I find out this HOA has been operating outside the bounds of the law, I'll bury you in litigation so deep you'll need a map to find your way out. I'd seen my brother in prosecutor mode before, but never defending me. It was glorious and terrifying in equal measure. Patricia gathered her papers, snapped her fingers at the bulldozer operators, and climbed back into her SUV. Within 5 minutes, the equipment was lumbering back down my driveway. Benjamin and I stood in the morning sunshine, watching them disappear. My hands were shaking with leftover adrenaline. "Ma, thank you," I said. "If you hadn't shown up when you did, I want you to document everything. Take photos of the barn from every angle, inside and out. Write down every interaction you've had with the HOA, every piece of mail you did or didn't receive. We're building a case here, Nathan, and I have a feeling this goes deeper than a simple permit dispute." "You think they're really trying to steal my land?" "I think someone sees profit in those townhouses, and your barn is in the way. The question is how far they're willing to go to remove it." We walked over to the barn together. I'd spent countless weekends replacing rotted boards, reinforcing the foundation, installing new windows. The interior was clean and organized, with my woodworking tools neatly arranged and several restoration projects in various stages of completion. I'd even had the electrical system updated and inspected by a licensed electrician just last year. "This doesn't look like a safety hazard to me," Benjamin said, running his hand along one of the original support beams. "This is solid oak. They don't make them like this anymore." That's what the contractor said when I had him evaluate the structure. He told me with proper maintenance, this barn could last another 100 years. Benjamin pulled out his phone and started taking pictures. "I'm documenting current condition. When you get those papers from Patricia, we'll compare her supposed inspection report against reality. If they lied about the barn being unsafe, that's fraud." We spent the next hour going through every inch of the property. Benjamin photographed the barn, the fence line, the boundary markers, and even my mailbox. He had me check my online banking to confirm the dates I'd paid HOA dues, and he made copies of my deed, my title insurance, and every piece of paperwork from the original purchase. "I'm going to make some calls," he said as we walked back to the house. "I have a friend at the postal inspector's office, and I want to get ahead of this mail situation. In the meantime, you need to secure everything. Lock the barn, set up cameras if you can, and don't leave the property unattended for long periods." "You think they'll try again?" "I think Patricia Whitmore is used to getting her way, and she doesn't strike me as someone who backs down easily. We've bought you time, but this fight is just beginning." Benjamin left around 10, and I spent the rest of the morning installing security cameras I ordered with express delivery from Amazon. By Tuesday evening, I had 4 wireless cameras covering the barn from different angles, all linked to my phone with motion alerts. True to Patricia's word, or rather to Benjamin's threat, a nervous young man showed up at 4:45 with a thick manila envelope. He introduced himself as Derek Sampson, the HOA secretary, and he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I'm just delivering the documents," he said quickly. "I don't want any trouble." "Did you know they were planning to demolish my barn?" Derek shifted his weight from foot to foot. "I just take notes at the meetings and handle the paperwork. Patricia makes all the decisions." "What about the rest of the board?" "There is no rest of the board, not really. Patricia's husband Gary is the treasurer, and her sister Linda is the compliance officer. They vote on everything together." "That seems like a conflict of interest." Derek shrugged helplessly. "I just work here, man. I need the job." He thrust the envelope at me and practically ran back to his car. I took the documents inside and spread them across my kitchen table. The first thing I noticed was that the certified mail receipts showed a signature, but it wasn't mine. The scrawled name looked like N. Everett, but the handwriting was all wrong. Someone had forged my signature. The inspection report was even more interesting. It claimed the barn had a compromised foundation, dangerous electrical wiring, and a roof on the verge of collapse. The inspector's name was listed as Michael Torres, licensed structural engineer. I pulled up the Virginia Department of Professional and Occupational Regulation website and searched for his credentials. No results found. I searched again, trying different spellings. Nothing. I expanded my search to include lapsed licenses and disciplinary actions. Still nothing. Either Michael Torres didn't exist, or he wasn't a licensed engineer in Virginia. My phone rang. Benjamin's name flashed on the screen. "Tell me you found something," he said instead of hello. "The mail receipts are forged and the inspector doesn't exist. At least, he's not licensed in Virginia." "Perfect. That's fraud, forgery, and possibly conspiracy. I'm coming over. Don't touch anything else until I get there." Benjamin arrived with his wife, Brenda Foster, who was a real estate attorney. She was sharp as a tack and had a reputation for eating opposing counsel for breakfast. Together, they went through every document with the attention to detail of surgeons performing brain surgery. "This is a disaster," Brenda said after an hour. "For them, I mean. This is great for you, Nathan. They've handed you a slam dunk case on a silver platter." "Explain it to me like I'm 5, I said. Brenda tapped the inspection report. "They hired a fake inspector to create a false report justifying demolition. They forged your signature on certified mail receipts to make it look like you received proper notice. And they attempted to proceed with unpermitted demolition, which is illegal. Any one of these things could cost them. All 3 together, you could sue them into oblivion." "I don't want money. I want them to leave me alone." "You're going to get both," Benjamin said. "But first, we need to figure out why they're so desperate to get rid of your barn. Brenda, what do you know about development deals in Fairfax County?" "Enough to know that townhouse complexes are gold mines right now. The market is insane, and developers are paying premium prices for land near the metro. Meadowbrook Hills is what, 2 miles from the Vienna station?" "About that," I confirmed. "Then this is about money, big money. Someone's planning a major development, and they need your land to make it work." Brenda pulled up a map on her laptop. The HOA boundaries include about 40 acres of common area, plus the individual lots. If they could consolidate enough land, they could build maybe 80 to 100 townhouses. "But they can't just take people's property," I protested. "No, but they can make life difficult enough that people sell. How many of your neighbors have moved out in the last year or 2? I thought about it. 4 or 5 families at least. The Hendersons, the Patels, the Johnsons, the Martins, and I think the family on the corner. "And who bought their houses?" "I don't know. New people moved in pretty quickly, though. Young families, mostly." Brenda exchanged a look with Benjamin. "I'll pull the property records tomorrow. I'm willing to bet we find a pattern." That night, I barely slept. I kept checking the camera feeds on my phone, expecting to see shadowy figures approaching the barn with sledgehammers. But nothing happened. The property remained quiet under the glow of the security lights I'd installed. Wednesday morning brought unexpected visitors. 2 Fairfax County police officers showed up at my door just after 8. "Nathan Everett?" the older officer asked. He was in his 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. That's me. What's this about?" "We received a complaint from Patricia Whitmore, president of your HOA. She alleges that you threatened her and prevented her from performing her lawful duties yesterday." I stared at him. "She's lying. She tried to illegally demolish my barn, and my brother, who's the DA, stopped her because she didn't have proper permits." The younger officer, a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes, tilted her head. "Your brother is Benjamin Everett?" "Yes." "The same Benjamin Everett who prosecuted the Riverside corruption case last year?" "That's him." She turned to her partner. "Mike, I think we need to hear his side of this." I invited them in and showed them everything. The forged mail receipts, the fake inspection report, the photos of my barn's actual condition, and the timeline of events. The older officer, whose name tag read Morrison, took notes while his partner, Officer Chen, examined the documents with increasing interest. "This is way above our pay grade," Morrison said finally. "This is civil court territory, maybe criminal depending on how the investigation shakes out." "But Mrs. Whitmore filed a police report claiming I threatened her," I said. Officer Chen pulled out her own phone and scrolled through something. "Her exact words were that you became verbally aggressive and created a hostile environment. That's not actually a crime, especially given the circumstances. She was attempting to demolish your property without notice. You had every right to be upset." "So I'm not in trouble?" Not from us, Morrison said, but I'd recommend documenting every interaction with the HOA from here on out. If she's willing to file a false police report, she's willing to escalate this in other ways. After they left, I called Benjamin and told him about the complaint. He swore colorfully. She's trying to establish a paper trail that makes you look like the aggressor. It's a classic legal tactic. Make the victim look unreasonable so her actions seem justified. What do I do? Exactly what you're doing. Stay calm, document everything, and don't engage with her directly. All communication goes through me or Brenda from now on. The next few days were tense. I worked from home, my laptop set up at the kitchen table where I could watch the security camera feeds on a second monitor. My job as a software developer for a defense contractor allowed for remote work, which was a blessing under the circumstances. On Friday, Brenda called with news. I pulled the property records. In the last 18 months, 7 properties in Meadowbrook Hills have sold. 6 of them were purchased by a company called Summit Residential Holdings. The 7th was bought by Gary Whitmore. Patricia's husband? The very same. And here's where it gets interesting. Summit Residential Holdings is a subsidiary of Whitmore Development Group, which is owned by, wait for it, Gary Whitmore. So they're buying up the neighborhood? Not just buying. They're systematically acquiring properties, and I'm willing to bet they're not being entirely honest about their intentions. I talked to one of the families who sold, the Patels. They said the HOA had been fining them constantly for trivial violations, making their lives miserable. When Summit made an offer, they jumped at the chance to get out. That's what they're trying to do to me. Except you have something they really need. That 1/4 acre where your barn sits. According to the development plans I found filed with the county under a different project name, they need your land to meet the access road requirements for the townhouse complex. Without it, the whole project falls apart. Can they force me to sell? Not unless they can prove some kind of legal violation, which is what they're trying to manufacture with the fake inspection report. But now that we know what they're doing, we can stop them. I'm filing an injunction first thing Monday morning to prevent any further harassment or attempts to interfere with your property. That weekend, I decided to do some investigating of my own. I walked over to Tom's house, my neighbor to the south, and asked him what he knew about the HOA. Tom was a retired engineer in his 70s, sharp as ever and deeply suspicious of authority figures. We'd bonded over our shared love of woodworking and old barns. Va! The Whitmores are crooks, he said bluntly, inviting me into his workshop. They've been trying to force me out for a year now. Fines for grass being a 1/4 inch too tall, complaints about my trash cans being visible from the street, citations for holiday decorations staying up too long. It's harassment, plain and simple. Why do they want you out? Same reason they want you out. Money. Gary Whitmore used to be a small-time developer, mostly strip malls and office buildings. But he got into residential development about 5 years ago, and he's been buying up neighborhoods ever since. The strategy is always the same. Get control of the HOA, make life hell for existing residents, buy their properties at below market prices, then redevelop the whole area. That should be illegal. It probably is, but who's going to stop them? Most people don't have the resources to fight back. They take the offer and move on. Tom grinned. But you've got Benjamin in your corner, and that changes everything. You should join the lawsuit. Brenda said I have grounds for a civil suit against the HOA. Count me in. I've got documentation of every bogus fine and complaint. Let's nail these bastards. By the time I left Tom's house, I had a folder full of papers showing a pattern of harassment and abuse by the HOA. Tom had kept meticulous records, including photos, emails, and even recordings of HOA meetings where Patricia had made thinly veiled threats about compliance. Monday morning, Brenda filed the injunction and also submitted a formal complaint to the Virginia office of the Attorney General regarding the HOA's practices. Benjamin opened an investigation into the forged mail receipts, bringing in the postal inspector to examine the evidence. The response was swift and furious. On Monday afternoon, I received a certified letter, this time legitimately delivered to me in person by a process server. The HOA was suing me for $60,000 in fines, back dues, and damages for disrupting authorized HOA activities. They're out of their minds, Brenda said when I forwarded her the lawsuit. "This is a slap suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation. They're trying to intimidate you into backing down by burying you in legal costs." Will it work? Not even a little bit. Virginia has anti-slap statutes. We'll get this dismissed and they'll be on the hook for our legal fees. They just made a very expensive mistake. The court date was set for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, life in Meadowbrook Hills became increasingly surreal. Patricia began showing up at HOA community events with a videographer, documenting every interaction with residents. She claimed it was for transparency, but everyone knew she was building evidence for her lawsuits. I kept working on the barn, refusing to be intimidated. I installed new gutters, painted the trim, and started work on converting the loft into a proper workspace. Every improvement was documented and photographed, creating a clear record that the building was being maintained and improved, not neglected. 2 weeks before the court date, Benjamin called me with urgent news. "We found something." The postal inspector traced those forged signatures. They were signed for by a woman named Sharon Kent, who happens to be Patricia Whitmore's cousin. She works at the Meadowbrook Hills Clubhouse as an event coordinator. So Patricia had her intercept my mail. That's what it looks like. The inspector is filing federal charges for mail tampering and fraud. Sharon was picked up this morning, and she's already talking. Apparently, Patricia promised her a kickback from the development deal if she helped clear obstacles. This is insane. This is criminal conspiracy, and it's about to get a lot worse for the Whitmores. Sharon says there are at least 4 other homeowners whose mail was tampered with. We're talking multiple counts of federal offenses. The next few days were a whirlwind. The story broke in the Washington Post after a reporter caught wind of the DA investigating his own HOA. The headline read, "Fairfax County HOA, accused of fraud and intimidation in land grab scheme." Suddenly, Meadowbrook Hills was famous for all the wrong reasons. News vans lined the streets, reporters ambushed residents for interviews, and Patricia Whitmore went into hiding, refusing to comment. The court date arrived on a rainy Thursday in early June. The Fairfax County Courthouse was packed with residents from Meadowbrook Hills, many of whom had their own grievances against the HOA. Tom sat beside me, along with 3 other families who'd agreed to testify about their experiences with Patricia's harassment. The HOA's lawyer, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit, tried to argue that the entire case was based on misunderstandings and clerical errors. Brenda systematically destroyed his arguments, presenting evidence of the forged mail receipts, the fake inspection report, and the pattern of harassment documented by multiple residents. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Hernandez, listened to both sides with increasing displeasure. When the HOA lawyer tried to claim that the demolition was a simple mistake, she cut him off. "Counselor, I've reviewed the evidence, and this is not a simple mistake. This appears to be a coordinated effort to defraud and intimidate homeowners for financial gain. I'm granting the injunction and dismissing the HOA's counterclaim with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm ordering the HOA to pay Mr. Everett's legal fees and awarding punitive damages in the amount of $200,000. The courtroom erupted. Patricia Whitmore, who'd shown up looking pale and drawn, started to stand, but her lawyer pulled her back down. Judge Hernandez wasn't done. "I'm also referring this matter to the Virginia State Corporation Commission for investigation into the HOA's corporate practices, and I'm recommending that the Fairfax County Commonwealth's attorney review the evidence for possible criminal charges beyond those already filed by federal authorities." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Benjamin, ever the professional, gave a brief statement about justice being served and the importance of holding HOAs accountable to the law. I mostly just tried to get to my truck without tripping over camera cables. That evening, my phone rang. It was Derek Sampson, the HOA secretary. "Mr. Everett, I just wanted to tell you that I resigned today. I'm done working for those people. I also wanted you to know that there are documents, financial records that show how deep this goes. Patricia and Gary have been skimming from the HOA budget for years, using the money to fund their development deals. Have you told anyone else? I'm talking to the State Corporation Commission investigator tomorrow. I just thought you should know that what happened to you, it's happened to a lot of people. You're the first one who fought back and won. The criminal trial for Sharon Kent happened in August. She pleaded guilty to mail tampering and fraud in exchange for testimony against Patricia and Gary Whitmore. Her testimony was damning. Patricia had personally directed her to intercept mail for specific homeowners, forge signatures, and destroy documents that might interfere with their plans. The federal prosecutor, working in coordination with Benjamin's office, built an overwhelming case. By September, both Patricia and Gary Whitmore were facing multiple federal and state charges, including mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, forgery, and theft by deception. The trial was scheduled for November, and it was one of the most anticipated cases in Fairfax County that year. The courtroom was packed every day with residents, reporters, and legal observers. Benjamin couldn't prosecute directly because of his personal connection to the case, but he sat in the gallery every day, watching as his colleagues systematically dismantled the Whitmores' defense. The evidence was overwhelming. Prosecutors presented emails showing Gary and Patricia discussing how to encourage residents to sell. They showed financial records documenting the skimming from HOA funds. They brought in expert witnesses who testified about the fake inspection report and the forged mail receipts. They even had recordings from HOA meetings where Patricia had made threats that, in hindsight, sounded more like mob tactics than community governance. The defense tried to argue that they were just trying to improve the neighborhood, that any irregularities were honest mistakes. But when Sharon Kent took the stand and calmly described how Patricia had coached her on forging signatures and timing mail interceptions, the jury's faces said it all. On November 18th, after 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on 18 of 20 charges. Patricia broke down sobbing. Gary just stared at the table, his face blank. Sentencing happened in January. Patricia received 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Gary got 7 years because of his leadership role in the conspiracy. They were also ordered to pay over $2 million in restitution to the homeowners they'd defrauded, including significant damages to me, Tom, and the other families who'd been driven out of their homes. The day after sentencing, I stood in my barn, running my hand over the smooth oak beams. The space was finally finished, a beautiful workshop with natural light streaming through the new windows, my tools organized on custom-built shelves, and the loft converted into a cozy office space. Benjamin stopped by with coffee, something that had become our Tuesday morning tradition. "How does it feel?" he asked, looking around at the restored barn. "Like justice," I said, "but also kind of sad. All of this, the trial, the prison sentences, it didn't have to happen. If they'd just followed the law, if they'd treated people with basic respect, none of this would have been necessary." That's the problem with people like the Whitmores. They see rules as obstacles to work around, not principles to follow. They forgot that the law applies to everyone, even HOA presidents. What's happening with the neighborhood? The HOA is being dissolved and restructured. The residents voted to form a new organization with actual oversight and term limits for board members. Tom's helping lead the transition. Good, he'll keep them honest. Benjamin sipped his coffee, looking thoughtful. You know, when I drove up that morning and saw those bulldozers, I was furious. But I also felt this weird sense of purpose, like this was exactly where I was supposed to be at that exact moment. Timing is everything. If you'd been 10 minutes later, I don't want to think about it, but Nathan, you need to understand something. You didn't win because I'm the DA. You won because they broke the law, and you had the courage to fight back. Plenty of people in your situation would have just given up. I had help. I had you and Brenda and Tom and all those other families who were willing to testify. That's the real lesson here. Standing up to bullies is easier when you're not standing alone. We finished our coffee in comfortable silence, watching through the barn door as the morning sun climbed higher over Meadowbrook Hills. The neighborhood was changing, but this time in a good way. The families who'd been forced out were filing lawsuits to recoup their losses. Summit Residential Holdings was in bankruptcy, its assets being liquidated to pay creditors and victims. The townhouse development was dead. My property value had actually increased, not because of forced development, but because Meadowbrook Hills was becoming known as a neighborhood that stood up for itself. Young families were moving in, attracted by the strong community spirit and the new, accountable HOA. A few weeks later, I got a letter from one of the families who'd been forced to sell, the Patels. They'd moved to Loudoun County, but they wrote to thank me for fighting back and to let me know they'd received a settlement check that more than covered their losses. Mrs. Patel included a line that stuck with me. "You gave us our dignity back." I framed that letter and hung it in the barn office, a reminder of what was really at stake in fights like these. It wasn't just about property or money. It was about refusing to be victimized, about standing up for what was right even when it was difficult, about believing that the system could work if you pushed hard enough. Tom stopped by one afternoon in March, almost a year to the day after Patricia had tried to demolish my barn. He was carrying a bottle of bourbon and wearing a grin. "What's the occasion?" I asked. "The new HOA just voted unanimously to designate your barn as a historic landmark. They're even putting up a plaque." "You're kidding." "Nope. The plaque will read, 'The Everett Barn, built 1924, restored 2023-2024, a symbol of heritage preservation and community resilience.' How's that for irony?" We sat on my back porch, sipping bourbon and watching the sunset behind the old barn. The red paint glowed in the fading light, and I could see my grandfather's craftsmanship in every line and angle. He'd built this structure to last, to serve his family for generations. And now it would, thanks to a morning's worth of perfect timing and a brother who happened to be in the right place at the right time. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't stopped by that morning?" Benjamin asked. He'd joined us, drawn by the sight of bourbon and the promise of good conversation. "I try not to," I admitted. "But honestly, I think I would have fought anyway. Maybe not as effectively, maybe not as quickly, but I would have fought. That barn means too much to me." "It means something to the whole neighborhood now," Tom said. "It's proof that HOAs don't have unlimited power, that homeowners have rights, and that sometimes the good guys actually win." We raised our glasses in a toast, three guys who'd stood up to bullies and come out on top. The legal bills had been substantial, even with the court-ordered reimbursements. The stress had cost me sleep and probably a few years off my life. But sitting there on my porch, looking at my barn still standing proud and solid, I knew it had been worth every penny and every sleepless night. The criminal case had sent shockwaves through the HOA industry in Virginia. The state legislature passed new laws requiring greater oversight of homeowner associations, mandatory audits of HOA finances, and stricter penalties for board members who abused their authority. Patricia and Gary Whitmore had become cautionary tales, their names synonymous with HOA corruption. I continued my work as a software developer, but I also became something of an accidental advocate for homeowner rights. I gave talks at community centers, advised people dealing with their own HOA problems, and even testified before the state legislature about the need for HOA reform. The barn became my sanctuary, the place where I could escape the stress of the outside world and focus on creating something with my hands. I taught woodworking classes for kids from the neighborhood, passing on the skills my grandfather had taught me. The barn that Patricia Whitmore had tried to destroy became a community asset, a gathering place, and a symbol of everything an HOA should be about, bringing people together, not tearing them apart. Benjamin's career flourished too. The Whitmore case raised his profile significantly, and there was talk of him running for Attorney General when the current AG's term ended. He'd proven that even people in positions of power could be held accountable, that the law applied equally to everyone, and that sometimes justice required someone willing to stand up and fight. On quiet mornings, when I'm alone in the barn with my coffee and my tools, I sometimes think about that Tuesday when 3 bulldozers rolled onto my property. I think about how close I came to losing something irreplaceable, and how a combination of timing, family loyalty, and sheer stubbornness saved it. But mostly, I think about my grandfather, working in this same space almost a century ago, building something meant to last. He never could have imagined the battles this barn would survive, the corruption it would help expose, or the legal precedents that would be set in its defense. He just built something solid and true and trusted that it would endure. He was right. The barn endured, and so did everything it represented, the value of hard work, the importance of standing your ground, and the belief that some things are worth fighting for no matter the cost. The Whitmores are in federal prison now, their development empire dismantled, their reputations destroyed. Sharon Kent served 18 months and was released with probation. Derek Sampson got a job with a legitimate property management company and occasionally sends me updates about how the new Meadowbrook Hills HOA is functioning exactly as an HOA should, maintaining common areas, organizing community events, and leaving homeowners alone to live their lives. As for my barn, it stands exactly where it's always stood, red paint gleaming, oak beams solid, a testament to craftsmanship and stubbornness in equal measure. The plaque Tom mentioned is mounted near the entrance, and people sometimes stop to read it and take pictures. It's become a local landmark, which would probably horrify Patricia Whitmore if she knew. But she doesn't get a vote anymore. She lost that right when she decided that power and profit mattered more than integrity and the law. She learned the hard way that in America, even the smallest homeowner has rights, and even the most powerful HOA president can't ignore those rights without consequences. I learned something too, that family matters, that timing matters, and that sometimes the person you need most shows up exactly when you need them. White Ford F-150 and all, ready to fight for what's right. The barn that almost wasn't is now the barn that will always be, protected by landmark status, community support, and the memory of the day we proved that justice still means something in Fairfax County, Virginia. And every time I walk through those wide barn doors, past my grandfather's handiwork and into the space I've made my own, I'm reminded that some battles are worth fighting, some structures are worth saving, and some stories are worth telling. This is mine, and I'm grateful it ended the way it did, with the barn still standing, the bad guys in prison, and a neighborhood that learned the power of standing together against corruption. It's not the ending Patricia Whitmore wanted, but it's the ending she earned. And it's exactly the ending my grandfather's barn deserved.